Hi, this is my review of Mythic Game Master Emulator. As you can see, I printed this PDF because I usually like to print short PDFs. It's nice to look at them on the screen, but sometimes it's also quite comfortable for me to flip through the entire thing. Mythic Game Master Emulator basically serves as a sort of universal engine to run any role-playing game, or more specifically any role-playing game system that you can think of, to play entire adventures and campaigns. Now, let's talk about the quality of the PDF. The quality is good. It's everything is well organized and explained. I didn't find any major errors. Just at the end, I don't remember the page, but I found like a missing letter, but nothing was served as some sort of obstacle or difficulty to understanding the content. The charts are also very well laid out. The only negative thing I can say about the Mythic Game Master Emulator in terms of quality is the art. The art starts pretty good. First you have this sort of like a jester, gremlin or goblin type of creature, and then you have this it looks like some sort of cyborg lady or a female fighter, in sci-fi fighter with a sort of power armor. But as you move along, you find some very well, this one is still acceptable in my opinion, at least for me. It's sort of like a slime goblin of sorts. But then you start getting these really tacky, I would consider them tacky pieces of illustrations or art. You have these women with out of proportion bodies, and I don't mean that they are voluptuous or over sexualized. I love seeing scantily clad women as much as any other guy, and I'm sure there are women who like to see men half naked. But the proportions just seem a bit off. You have some other illustrations, and that they seem there's always like something that doesn't feel right about the proportion. This one isn't as bad, or so, although it presents a sort of like a drag queen vibe to it. If that's what they were looking for, well, they succeeded with that one. But and here we have another one. Looks like sort of like an Arabian dancer fighter, but again the proportions are just horrible in my opinion. They seem too out of place. And you can play with proportions when you illustrate the female figure. But like for example, in some anime and manga, you see some very nice looking women. But here the proportions are always a bit off. You can see like her waist is twisting somewhat crooked, somewhat weird. And I think this one is the worst. She forms some sort of S-like figure, very weird, and the entire body of the character just doesn't make any sense to me, even in an abstract way. So it's kind of difficult to explain, and I don't understand why they used all these sci-fi and fantasy women to such an extent for a Game Master Emulator. I don't know if they wanted to please the male audience or something, but and look at her chin is almost non-existent. She has like sort of like an E.T. head of sorts, and her swords, the swords really don't make, they look like some sort of bubblegum whip or something. And you get a few more illustrations in that style. Oh, I also didn't like this one because on the top of her body she looks somewhat organic, but the legs seem like kind of like sticks or tubes or something. So I didn't like the art of this emulator, and it's a shame because the content is amazing. I wish they would have added a different, used a different style of illustration, or perhaps another illustrator. Sorry if it sounds blunt. Now, let's talk about the content of Mythic Game Master Emulator. First, I'm going to talk a bit about what I've seen in different forums, and sometimes when I talk to people, that they say they would wish there was some sort of system or way to play role-playing games as a solitary means of entertainment, because there are many reasons for this. Sometimes you don't have a group to play RPGs with, or sometimes you want to test run a specific system or just an adventure, and you're looking for ways to play such role-playing games as a solo game. And this emulator is designed specifically for that, although I feel it's a bit more appropriate when it comes to narrative style of games rather than RPGs that feel more heavy on the game or rule side of things. First, you get a little introduction saying how you can use Mythic as a cooperative game, in the sense of that, for example, if you're always a game master that's running things and you want to have adventures with your fellows, you could create your character, and using Mythic you will have a sort of like an artificial game master to run things for you. You can also use it, of course, as I was telling you, as a solitary game, as a way to participate as a player with no game master or other players, and you can run adventures generating things with this emulator. And you could also play as you would normally do, with playing, perhaps you being a game master, and your players waiting for your instructions and description of the encounter. But you could use Mythic to generate some very spontaneous and improvised things. So in a sense, this emulator is very well suited for those games that thrive on improvisation. Although you could say that almost all RPGs thrive on improvisation, because you will find some unexpected things that you will have to think about them really quickly and make sense of it all. Now, there are two things that make Mythic work: the logic and the charts. And I would add common sense to the logic. Now, logic means that you have to see the entire context of an adventure or a scenario or encounter, and you have to piece things together so that they make sense. So for example, let's say you're a warrior that's having adventures inside a sort of like a dark god temple. So you're going to expect to find things such as altars and sacrificial chambers and summoning rooms, all sorts of rooms related to that dark deity or demon or wherever you're fighting against. And everything that you generate with the charts should be following that same train of logic. So if you generate a particular room, or you generate a random event, it's probably related to the context of that adventure, although there are ways to get some very surprising results as well. And now I specifically refer to common sense because there are ways that you could think of to exploit take advantage of the system. So for example, maybe you're always trying to find the most powerful treasure imaginable, and because this game can be played, this simulator can be used as a tool for solitary gameplay. Well, you have to balance things because you will be playing both as a player and as a game master. Now let's talk a bit more about the charts and how they work with the logic of everything. The core chart of it all is the fate chart. You have this chart right here. And this chart is going to give you probability of things that are going to happen or that will not happen, or things that happen in a very extraordinary way, or things that do not happen again in a very, let's say, blunt way. So, for example, let's say you're a superhero and you're entering this supervillain's lair, and you ask, is there a security system placed at the entrance of the base? Now, if you're fighting against a mad scientist type of supervillain, you check the fate chart, and under the circumstance that it's very likely or perhaps a sure thing that mad scientist is going to have a security system. So you make a roll, and if you roll below a number, yes, of course he's going to have a security system. If you roll above, no, there is no security system. So things don't necessarily mean that there has to be a security system because the villain is intelligent, because you have something called the chaos rank. And the chaos rank is a number that elevates or lowers the probability of something happening. So, and it depends on how much your character has had control over a specific encounter, or all the encounters in general. So, for example, if your character has been suffering a lot in battles and getting surprised by encounters and traps and missing a lot of clues, you could say that the situation is out of his or her control. So the chaos rank is going to be quite high, and the probability of something happening is going to be quite high. There's also the opposite thing, that maybe you're winning battles quite easily and you're moving quite smoothly throughout the entire adventure. The chaos rank is going to be quite low, and things won't be happening as much as you expect them to be. So, for example, in the case of the superhero, maybe you're fighting a supervillain that is more like brute strength and not too much brains, too much intelligence. So it's unlikely that there's a security system, but when you make your roll, there's a small chance that there is a security system installed at that particular base. You also could get an exceptional yes or an exceptional no. And this, I forgot to mention that almost everything is played out as a question. Well, you probably figured that out because of the way I said, is there a security system? So, depending on the adventure, you could be asking things as, is there a treasure chest inside this secret vault? Or is there a spaceship just outside the balcony of that science fiction base, or what have you? So yeah, that's the way you roll your results, and if you roll high enough, you get an exceptional yes. So, for example, in the case, is there a spaceship? And exceptional yes, yes, there is a spaceship. In fact, there are 3 spaceships. Or you could get an exceptional no, and no, there are no spaceships. In fact, the planet seems quite desolate, and no one has been at this base for probably 100 years or so. So you also get some variations to the type of result you will get. And if you roll doubles under the chaos rank, you get some random events, and you get different charts and tables to get different results. So, for example, maybe there's an event that happened in the past, or happened from a very far away distance from there, or maybe a helpful NPC appears, or an enemy NPC appears, or maybe you advance some part of the plot line, and you get all those results, and you get further information on how to interpret them using event actions and subjects. So maybe you rolled, as an action you rolled attainment, and as a subject you rolled disruption. So let's say it's a horror adventure, and there was this dark ritual being carried out, and the attainment and disruption could mean that there was this ritual was disrupted or interrupted just at the peak of the ritual, and something went wrong, and different dimensions crossed, and any crazy thing that you can imagine. And you have to interpret everything using logic and common sense. So you start generating all these random things, and you use all these tables and charts to set up the adventure from the very beginning. If you have just a very general idea of what type of game you want to play, it's very easy to use this system to further develop it. So, for example, maybe you want to play detective, pulp detective kind of story. And you could say, no, well, I'm playing Private Eye, and I live in New York, and I'm just waiting for a case to be solved. And you roll some random event results, and you could build, you hear some gunshots outside of your building, and then you could decide if you want to go out, or you want to stay and call police, or you want to do something else. And by making some other rolls, there could be further modification to this scenario. Maybe they weren't just gunshots, maybe they were actually some sort of high-tech weaponry that an evil organization was testing on the streets. And there are further ways to alter and modify your results. And you also have more tips and information in this emulator on how to organize lists, on how to build plot threads and use different characters, organizations, all sorts of entities to further involve your character with the game world. In fact, you could create an entire campaign setting using this emulator, not to mention adventures or encounters. So it's a very flexible tool. However, it's more suited, in my opinion, as I was telling you, to narrative or perhaps even rules-like games. So, for example, you like to play very precise miniatures-based combat games, maybe Hackmaster or Pathfinder, etc. If you're waiting to generate every detailed room with the scale and the placement of objects, I would recommend that you have some other type of random dungeon generating book at hand, because you won't be able to generate those specific results, or maybe you will, but with a lot of difficulty. So this is actually overall, I think this is a great tool. As a game master emulator, I don't think there's anything like it. There are some systems that approach it, such as Scarlet Heroes and the Mutant Epoch, but they still feel somewhat as a choose your own path types of games. Although Scarlet Heroes is quite flexible, I think the Scarlet Heroes, the system that it uses to generate solo and cooperative adventures, is certainly a match for Mythic. But if you want something that works with any RPG, you definitely need to get the Mythic Game Master emulator. There's also a version that has the emulator and a universal type of role-playing game. But if you have a favorite system, just get the Game Master emulator. It's actually a really nice product and quite handy for those of you who don't have a group and who want to test your adventures when you want to run them with players, because you want to make sure everything is balanced. Now, I've seen other threads in different forums that ask, is it even possible for you to play RPGs as a solo experience? And yes, but you must have in mind that it's a very different experience from an actual group composed session, because it's just too different. If you think that this will replace the experience that you have playing with actual people, no, it's not going to be like that. However, it's also quite enjoyable on its own. It kind of feels like a very meditative and even like a shamanic experience of sorts, because you start imagining all these worlds regenerated at random, and you start to generate a sort of like you have to split your personality, because you're going to be playing as a player and as a game master. Even if you get some ways to adjudicate things, you are still being a game master at a certain level, making sense of things. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.